I am so excited to finally be making a knit version of my unicorn baby that I released in crochet back in 2014. So it took me a while, but I'm so excited that I'm here to knit this up for you today. And today I will be using the Brava worsted weight in several different colors. The main color will be in the white. You can find this at KnitPicks.com. And then I'm also going to be using like a mint color, a pastel pink, a little bit of like a lavender style purple, and a yellow. I will have all those colors listed out in their deemed names in the comments in the listing description. And then I'm also going to be using 4.5 millimeter size 7 needles. I have them on a 22-inch circular. I really just love, even when I'm straight knitting, I love using circulars. And for the bonnet, we will also need either circulars or DPNs to decrease the back of the bonnet. You will also need a yarn needle to weave in those ends and attach stuff to the unicorn body and stuff like that. Then also some scissors. I obviously need a little bit more coffee. Sorry, my introduction's a bit slow, but I'm excited. Let's get started. We will be starting with our main body color. Feel free to make this in a different color. I'm going with the traditional white, so go ahead and grab that and your needles and let's get started. For this tutorial, I am going to be making the size newborn, so the smallest size, but this does also come in a 6-month, a 12-month, and an 18-month option in the pattern for purchase. To get started, we will be casting on 20 stitches for newborn, and I'm going to use the long tail cast on. I have a tutorial for this on my website, and I also have other cast ons. If you're interested, you could use a cable cast on for this one. Just be sure to match it with the bind off. But I'm going to keep it really simple today at the beginner level, and we are doing a long tail cast on of 20 stitches for the newborn size. Now that we cast on 20 stitches, we will start by working the romper top back. What will happen with this romper is it's made as one piece and seamed at the sides. So we're starting to work the back for a while, then we will do some increasing for the around like the waist and the bottom area, then we will decrease for the legs and work the crotch area, increase for the front body, and then come back and decrease for that front panel. But we're working this starting from the back top, and it is worked as one piece. Now for this, I've casted on 20 stitches, and we are simply going to start with a knit row, and we are going to work 14 total rows as stockinette. What that means is you're going to knit the knit rows, purl the purl rows for a total of 14 rows, and you will end on a purl row. Now that we've got our first 14 rows, it's time to do a little bit of increasing. So when we are on our knit row, we will knit one, or if you prefer, slip that first stitch, and we will make one right. To do this, we will be working this strand in between the stitches. We'll take our left needle and from back to front, so from the rear of the stitch to the front, we will pick it up, and then we will knit through the front of this stitch. What that does is it twists the stitch so that it's not as noticeable as an increase. So we've made one right, and now we will knit across until we get to the last stitch. And now that we've come to our last stitch, we're going to do one more increase. We're going to once again use that strand between the stitches, but this time we're going to make one left, where we insert our left-hand needle in front of that strand between the two stitches and pull it up, and then we are going to knit through the back loop of that strand we pulled up for a make one left, and then we will knit our last stitch. So we've made one right and made one left, and now it's time for us to simply purl a row. We've gone from 20 stitches to 22 stitches. And now that we are back on a knit side, we are going to repeat those last 2 rows until we have a total of 32 stitches. So I would knit one or even slip the first one in the row, make one right, knit until the last stitch of the row, And then the last stitch of the row, we are going to make one left. So we will be going from the front to the back and then knitting through that back loop and then knit the last stitch. So now we've increased by 2 stitches again, and then we will do a purl row. Repeat those 2 rows, making an increase on the knit side row for each side until you have a total of 32 stitches ending on a purl row. All right, so now we've done some increasing. This is how it will look on the baby. This will come down the back and we're increasing for the sides. And now we're going to take some stitch markers and we are going to mark each side of this row that we just increased to 32 stitches. The reason why is when we go to do our seaming later, it'll be much easier to match up where we need to seam if we mark the stitches on each side. And now for the bottom part of this, this is going to be the part that will kind of cover the bottom of the baby. We are going to be working in stockinette, so you're going to be alternating between rows of knit and purl. So knit the knit rows, purl the purl rows for a total of 20 rows. So now that we've increased, we're going to go ahead and just work in stockinette for 20 rows and then come on back. All right, I've completed just simply doing the 20 rows in stockinette. When we block this, it'll really help hold its shape, but you can kind of see how this is working up. And now it's time to work on our rise. Our rise is the area from this back part that will go underneath the crotch area and back up the other side. So we'll want to do some decreasing and then make some space and then some increasing. So that's what we're going to work on next. We're going to be doing the decreasing for this newborn size for the romper rise. So we'll start by slipping our first stitch or knitting it, whichever you prefer, and then we are going to do a slip. You're going to slip it knitwise, slip the next one knitwise, insert the left needle back into those 2 stitches and knit those 2 stitches together. So that is a slip slip knit. We'll be using a slip slip knit when we decrease from this side and a knit 2 together when we decrease from this left side. So now I will knit until the last 3 stitches. And now that I have 3 stitches left, I will do a knit 2 together and then knit my last stitch. We've decreased by 2 stitches. Our next row will be a purl row, so we'll simply purl across this row. So now I'm going to be repeating those last 2 rows where we do a decrease row. Remember, we do a slip slip knit on the right side, knit until the last 3 stitches, do a knit 2 together, and then knit the last stitch. So that's our decrease row. Then we do a row of purl. We are going to repeat those 2 rows until we have 18 stitches. Once we have 18 stitches, go ahead and work 4 more rows in the stockinette without increasing or decreasing, and then come on back. Now that we've decreased, done 4 rows of stockinette, it's time for us to increase again. So we will do the same style of increasing where we knit or slip our first stitch, make 1 right, knit until the last stitch, make 1 left, and then knit the last stitch. And then the next row, you purl. You repeat those 2 rows until the stitch count is back to 32 stitches. Now, this is the exact same way that we increased earlier in this area. So it's the same style. You're just going to increase again until we have 32 stitches. Now that we've worked our increases again, we can kind of envision where we are headed with this. If we fold it over, we've got our leg spaces created, and now we just need to do a little bit of stockinette stitch working right here, and then we'll do the last part, which is the front as far as the knitting goes. So for this next section, after you've increased and now you have 32 stitches, for the size newborn, do 18 rows in the stockinette where you knit the right side rows and purl the wrong side rows. So knit the knit rows, purl the purl rows for 18 total rows. Now that we have worked 18 rows in stockinette, it's time for us to decrease again. But before we do, we want to take our other 2 stitch markers and mark each side of the row we just completed. This way, when we go to do our seaming, it's a little bit easier. Now our decreases will be worked in the same way as before, where on the right side we'll work our first stitch, slip, slip, and knit the next two together, and then work until the end and knit two together before our last stitch. Then the next row that we will do will be a purl row, and each time we do these repeats it decreases by 2 stitches. So we will do this until we have 20 stitches left, doing a knit row where we decrease and then a purl row, and repeating those 2 rows until we have 20 stitches. And then once we have 20 stitches, we're going to work in stockinette again for a total of 14 rows. So as I get to the other side here on our decrease row, I knit 2 together and then knit that last stitch and then purl a row. So decrease until you have a total of 20 stitches, and then after that work 14 rows in stockinette and then come back so we can bind off. All right, now that we have completed our last repeat, it is time to bind off. We're just going to do one of those regular bind offs. We're going to knit the first 2 stitches, then take the first stitch on the right hand needle over the second. Then knit the next stitch, take the first stitch over the second, and you're just going to repeat that across. Now if you notice, we have got a lot of curl in what we've knit so far. So much so it just looks like a tube right now on the film, and we don't even see exactly what we have. So this part is where it's really critical to block your piece. I'm going to get out my blocking mats and pins, and I'm going to wet block this one because I really want it to block. You can do a steam block if you would like. And yes, we are working with acrylic yarn, but acrylic yarn can be blocked too, even though it's not a wool. So before going on to the seaming part, which will be next, we really want to make that easier by blocking this piece. And once I get to the end of this row here, I will fasten off, and I can go ahead and weave in any ends. We don't need our ends anymore. We can go ahead and weave those in. So now that I've completed that last stitch, I'm simply going to fasten off, weave in those ends, and block this piece. You go do the same and then come on back for some seaming. While we wait for our romper to block, let's dive into the bonnet. I've gone ahead for the size newborn and I have casted on 54 stitches. You could do this again with a long tail cast on, or this is the cable cast on, which I also have instructions for that on my blog. For this one, we will knit every odd row, purl every even row. So the same thing we were doing, you're just working in stockinette for a total of 4 inches or approximately 26 rows. So go ahead and knit a row, purl a row, work that stockinette and measure it until it's 4 inches or approximately 26 rows, and then come on back for the decreasing. Now that I have knit to be the depth that I need, it is time for me to join and work in the round. I've already gone ahead and knit the first row in the bonnet decreasing section. So now we are ready to start with the second row, which is to join. So to do this, I'm using the magic loop method where I fold my piece in half and I go ahead and grab this cord and pull it out the left side. What this does is it allows me to work in the round. I'll just simply be working across this front side, shifting it, working across the back side. You just go around and around, but you fold it in half and kind of sandwich it to make it much easier. To start decreasing, we will knit 2 together. And I like to make this one a little bit tight just because it is at the point that we're joining on the back of the bonnet, and then knit 7. And that's what we will repeat all the way around for this round. You knit 2 together and knit 7. After round 2 of the decreasing, we've gone from 54 stitches to now we have 48 stitches. And for the next round, we are going to do another round of decrease. We'll keep doing some rounds of decreases until we've got this bonnet completely decreased. We will simply do a knit 2 together, and then we will knit 6. and that will be our repeat around. Now, as you can tell, what we're going to be doing each round is we're just going to be knitting 2 together and then knitting an amount. So for this round, for round 3, it's knit 2 together, knit 6 around, and that will bring us to 42 stitches. For round 4, we will knit 2 together, then knit 5, and that brings us to 36 stitches. For round 5, we knit 2 together, knit 4, that brings us to 30 stitches. For round 6, we'll knit 2 together and knit 3, that will bring us to 24 stitches. For round 7, we will knit 2 together, then knit 2, and that brings us to 18 stitches. For round 8, we will knit 2 together, knit 1, that will bring us to 12 stitches, and then come back for round 9 for the newborn size. Now for round 9, the last round of decreasing, we will simply knit 2 together around. So just knit 2 together until you have 6 stitches remaining. And now that we have finished our decreasing, you can go ahead and fasten off and then grab a yarn needle. And now we will loop through the remaining stitches. So simply slip your yarn needle through these remaining 6 stitches. And now we can pull that remaining hole closed, and we've decreased the back of the bonnet, and we can just weave in our end. Now our bonnet does have some curl on the front, which can be cute, or you can kind of try to block that out a little bit. I always recommend blocking your pieces. It makes such a difference in the way that they look and the way that they're worn. Now we'll definitely need some ties on the front part of this bonnet. I'm going to go ahead and continue to use my white yarn by doing some chaining with a crochet hook. But if you would like to, you can always stitch on some ribbon onto the ends of this or an I-cord. To do a simple chain tie, I attach my yarn with my crochet hook, leaving a tail to weave in. And then I'm just simply going to do chains. I usually do about 50 chains or so, or the approximate length that I want for the tie. Now I will mention, since this is a bonnet that ties, I would only wear it under supervision on a baby because you don't want them to choke or anything, or leave it untied if you think the baby might not be observed. So with the size H crochet hook that I'm using today, I think 35 chains is probably enough for the newborn. So I simply fasten off, and I can pull that tight and kind of weave in both ends, and then simply repeat that on the other side. Now that I have my piece blocked, we have a lot less curling going on, and this next step will help even more. So when I look at this, I've got my back and my front, and what I need to do is join those together by seaming. So if I fold this up, we can see that now it's starting to look more like a romper, and we have our markers here. What we will do is we will start our seaming at the markers, joining those up, and then we are going to go down until the front part of the romper starts to decrease. We don't want to go past any decreases because we want to make sure that there is enough room for the legs. We want to leave a decent opening for the legs. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my yarn, and then we'll start some seaming. All right, so when I match these up and I see where my stitch markers are, what I will be doing is doing an invisible seam with you can see in between my stitches. There will be a horizontal bar between my stitches, and that is where I want to start my seaming. So I'll come from the left to the right side, and I'll grab that horizontal bar. It's right past my slip stitch. And then I'm going to come back to this side and do the same. go back and forth again, just grabbing that horizontal bar. And then as I pull this yarn in, I'm leaving it a little bit loose so you can kind of see how this goes. As I pull this together, you really can't see where the seam is. It matches those stitches up nicely. So keep working back and forth, being sure to stop before we start doing any type of decreasing so that it leaves space for the legs. Now that I've got the first side done, I weaved in my end, I still have an opening for the leg, and we can take out those beginning stitch markers. Then I'll simply need to repeat the invisible mattress seam for the other side. This is done in the exact same way, where we're going to come over here, line up our stitch markers, and seam the exact same amount that we did on this side. Now it's time to do our ties from this top part, which will also help this lay a little bit flatter. To do this, we will start by simply chaining 50. To do this, we will start by simply chaining 35 with an H hook. Now that we have our chain, we will grab one side of this romper. So this is our very first tie. And now we're going to slip stitch and work our way down and around this opening and then back up the other side. So go ahead and attach your yarn with a slip stitch to this top corner of the romper. And now continue to slip stitch around this opening. And in order to slip stitch, all we're doing is inserting our hook into that first edge stitch, yarning over, pulling up a loop and pulling that loop through the loop on our hook. And we're just going to do that all the way around this opening. And now that we have come to the other side of the romper, on the other side of that opening, we will chain 35. And then you can go ahead and fasten that off, weave in those ends, and we will have a tie for over the shoulder. Go ahead and repeat that on this other side as well. Now we're going to make a lot of the little pieces that go onto the unicorn to make it a unicorn. I have created a puff knit flower. I'm not going to do this in this video because I have a video linked to my YouTube channel that shows you this in detail. So I'll have that linked in the pattern as well. What we're going to do next is we're going to make a couple of leaves that can go on each side of this flower, and I'm going to go over that next. To get started on the leaf, we will do a long tail cast on of 3 stitches and leaving enough of a tail to stitch it onto the unicorn bonnet. Next, we will purl these 3 stitches, and this will be worked in rows. For row 3, we will knit 1 and then yarn over and knit 1 twice. For row 4, 5, and 6, we will simply purl the purl rows and knit the knit rows. For row 7, we will start this row with a slip, slip, knit those 2 slip stitches together. So decrease by 1. Then we will knit the next stitch and knit 2 together at the end of the row. So now we decrease by 1 again. So we're back down to 3 stitches. For row 8, we will purl those 3 stitches. And for row 9, which is our last row, we are going to slip the first 2 stitches knitwise, and then knit the last stitch, and then pass those 2 slip stitches over the last stitch. And that's it. This is all you have to do to make a leaf. I highly recommend blocking these. They do sit okay without blocking, but of course anything you block is going to look a little bit better. So you can take the very tip of the leaf where this tail end is sitting, and we can weave that in, but leave the beginning end so that we can stitch it to the bonnet later. Next, we are ready to make another ear. I've already made the first one, and I will show you how to make that again. To do so, we will start by casting on 4 stitches. I'm using the long tail, and this will be the top of the ear. So this will need to be worked in the round. You don't need quite as long as circulars. It's just what I've been working with. I'm kind of lazy to change it out. But what you will need to do is use the magic loop method. You can use DPNs for this, of course. I'm going to be using the magic loop, where I take my stitches and I take my cord and I split my stitches across these needles front and back, but I will be working in the round. For round 2, we are going to knit in the front and the back of the first stitch. Got my yarn all tangled here. Sometimes that happens. Got to get set up. So for round 2, we will be knitting in the front and the back. And then knit in the next. And then we will repeat that. This will increase this round from 4 stitches to 6. And now for rounds 3 and 4, we won't be increasing. We will simply be knitting 2 rounds of 6 stitches. And now for round 5. For round 5, we are going to knit in the front and the back of the first stitch and then knit in the next and repeat that around. So knit in the front and the back of the stitch and then knit the next stitch. And then repeat that around. This will increase from 6 stitches to 9. For round 6, we're simply going to knit in each stitch around for 9 stitches. And then for round 7, we're going to do another increasing round where we knit in the front and the back of the first stitch. And then we knit in the next 2, and we repeat that around. So knit in the front and the back of the first stitch, and then knit in the next 2. And this brings us to 12 stitches at the end of round 7. And round 8, once again, is simply to knit in each stitch around. For round 9, we are going to increase again. We'll do this by knitting in the front and the back of the first stitch, and then knitting in the next 2 stitches. This will increase our stitch count from 12 to 16 at the end of round 9. For rounds 10 and 11, we will simply be knitting in each stitch around, so you have 16 stitches. For round 10 and 11, you'll just knit in each stitch around. For round 12, this will be our last increasing round. We are going to knit in the front and the back of the first stitch and then knit into the next 3 stitches and repeat that around. So knit in the front and the back and then knit 3. At the end of this round, we will have 16 stitches. Then we will work 2 final rounds, round 13 through 14, as knitting those 20 stitches. Now it is time to bind off, and to do so we will knit the first 2 stitches, and then we will take the second loop on the right hand needle over the first, And that's just going to be our bind off. Knit one and then take the second loop over the first and do that all the way around. And now go ahead and fasten off, leaving a long tail because this will be sewn to the bonnet, but your beginning end, you can go ahead and weave that in. And now for one of the most important parts of a unicorn, the horn. We are going to go ahead and work at this one in the round as well. So you'll need your circulars or DPNs, and we are going to cast on 4 stitches. Now this will also be worked in the round. It's very similar in the way the ear was worked, where I'm going to go ahead and split those stitches from the front and back of my needles to work the magic loop method. All right, so for round 2, we are going to knit in the front and the back of the first stitch. And then we are going to knit into the next. And then we're going to repeat that, so it will be increasing from 4 stitches to 6 stitches. Now for rounds 3 and 4, we are simply going to knit in each stitch around. So you'll simply knit the 3 stitches or the 6 stitches in the round for rounds 3 and 4. Now for round 5, we are going to be doing the same thing we did on round 3, increasing. Or on round 2, we are going to increase in the front and the back of the stitch and then knit in the next and repeat that around. What that will do is it will increase from 6 stitches to 9. And now for rounds 6 and round 7, we will simply knit in each stitch around, so knit the 9 stitches for 2 rounds. And now for round 8, we will be increasing again. In the very first stitch, we will knit in front and the back. And in the next 2 stitches, we will simply knit. So you'll repeat that around, knitting in the front and the back, and then knitting 2 stitches. This will increase to 12 total stitches. And then for rounds 9 and 10, you will simply knit 2 rounds of 12 stitches. We can kind of see this unicorn horn forming here. And for round 11, we are going to knit in the front and the back. And then we are going to knit 5 and then do that again. This will increase from 12 stitches to 14. And now for round 14, we will knit in the front and the back of the first stitch and then knit in the next 6 and repeat. That will increase from 14 stitches to 16 stitches. And then the next 2 rounds, round 14 and round 15 and round 16, will be knit in solid without increasing, so 2 rounds of knitting in each stitch around. And if you'd like to add more rows to make your horn taller, feel free. You can kind of set it on top of your bonnet before binding off to see if you like your height. And then we will simply do a regular bind off and set this horn aside for assembly. Be sure when you are complete with this bind off that you leave a long enough tail because we are going to stitch it to the bonnet as well as add a little bit of detail to the horn. So we'll need, I would say for this one, at least an 18-inch tail possibly, just to give yourself plenty of space. Now that we have the pieces of our knit unicorn all done, it is time to assemble. I like to start with the horn on the hood, since that's on the bonnet, since that's the centerpiece and the main thing that makes it a unicorn. Now, if you want this to not curl as much, you can go ahead and block it. It doesn't bother me. I kind of like that curled edge. It's really cute. So I'm going to leave mine and I'm going to go ahead and place the horn. I'm going to fold it in half, find my center, and then I'll be placing my horn. But before I do so, I'm going to take a little bit of Fiberfill. If you have some yarn scraps, those work well if you don't have any Fiberfill on hand. And I'm going to stuff this to be firm, but not so firm that it looks bulging or awkward. So you just want to make sure that it has like a good consistency, that it holds up straight, but we don't want it to get to where it's just very bulgy. And stitch this on. Simply using a whip stitch going around the base, attaching it to the bonnet. Now that we've worked that around, we're going to go ahead and do something that shapes this even a little bit more. So we have our strand here, and I'm going to loop it a couple more whip stitches, that way it stays in place when I start tugging on it. And then I'm going to take this strand and wrap it around this horn so that it will add a bit of a swirl to it. So what happens is as we wrap and we kind of pull it snug, it shapes that unicorn horn to have that curled look as if it's curling. So I'm going to do that, and then all I will do in the end is simply weave in the tail end to the top just to hold it in place. And you can kind of play with it, see what works best, but I really like that little added touch that just adds that extra shaping to that horn. All right, next it's time for the ears. Now, to be honest, the ears don't really need stuffing. If you want to add a little bit because you feel like they need more shape, you can. But for the ears, what I like to do is grab my yarn needle. And when I'm going to put this on, I'm going to fold it on the bottom in almost a C shape. So this very bottom part of the ear, if you fold it into like a C, it creates a little divot in the middle and shapes that ear. So after I fold it like a C, I'll place it onto the bonnet and stitch each ear with a whip stitch on each side of the horn. Now, after placing the ears, we're going to go ahead and place our cute little accessory flower. And this, once again, this flower can be found on my blog. The full instructions are linked within the pattern, and I'll try to link them in the comments of this video as well, but this is something that is step by step on my blog. So I'm going to go ahead and place this flower onto the front of the, like right in front of the horn, and sorry, I moved out of camera there. And once again, stitch it in place. It's hard for me to keep my hands down low at times. I'm sure you can understand. I like to bring it up close so I can see better. I'm going to stitch this into place, and then of course every flower will need some leaves, so that's why we created the leaves. It adds that extra pop of color too. I'm just going to weave in my end through this horn and fasten it off. And then I've got my cute little leaves left, and these have a nice little curl to them that I think add a little cuteness to this. And you can feel free, if you really want to do more flowers, more leaves, you could really make the front of this decadent, but I'm just going to keep it simple today with simply one flower and two leaves. So I'm going to pull that in and stitch that in right behind my flower and allow that little curl to kind of pop out. You can just stitch until you're comfortable with the way that it feels. It's really just about the placement that you like. Now here's another fun thing you can do that you might have around your house that could add a little bit more color to these ears, because oftentimes when we create ears, we notice they have some pink inside. So you can simply take some eyeshadow or blush and a brush and gently start to pat some of that inside of those ears and then brush it in. And what that does is it gives a little bit more dimension to those ears, a little bit more realistic look, I guess you could say. And I really like having that as an extra touch. So one of the last steps, but one of the more important ones to have a really cute look, is the mane and the tail. So to do this, we need to cut a lot of strands of yarn, and to measure and cut each one would just be horrendous. So I like to take a book. I found this cute little book. No, I haven't read it, but I feel like I should, in my little library collection, and I chose the length of a book that's about the length I want to work with for the mane or the tail, and I can always trim it up later. And the nice thing about choosing a hardback book is many of them have that divot here, which we need to put our scissors through. So you will grab your yarn at the top or bottom of your book and wind around. And I don't honestly count this. I just wind however much I want to do for a little while, work it, and then if I need to, wind more. The nice thing is this will always measure them out to be pretty equal. And now that I've wrapped as many times as I want to for this go round, I'm going to go ahead and just grab the yarn, take my scissors, and make a cut at the top of the book. It doesn't destroy the book, and now you have lots of strands of yarn to work with for the mane and the tail. Next comes the attaching of the mane and the tail. I find you can work more than one strand at a time, or you can do a single strand for certain areas. This is all about like that hair placement. So I'm going to take 2 strands and fold it in half. And now I have my halfway point with this loop. I'll take a crochet hook and I'm going to weave through a spot where I'd like to attach hair. Grab halfway point of these 2 strands and pull them through. And then with this open area, this loop that we've pulled through, we can either use our fingers or the crochet hook and then grab the rest of the yarn here and pull through. This is called a lark's head knot. It creates a nice little knot that also helps the hair stand and kind of have a little bit of body. So we will continue to do this for the mane until it is the look that we like. It's really preference for you on what you want. You can also do the mane in different colors. I've done this on a crochet version where I did like pink, purple, blue, and yellow so that the mane was in rainbow, which was really cute. Today I'm just going to be making it all in pink. And for some areas, if you didn't want to have 2 strands because you didn't want it to look too thick, you can simply use 1 strand, maybe more towards the front, so it looks a bit more delicate, and loop it through. And if you're not sure where to place the strands, the nice thing is these can be undone before you pull them too tight. It's easier. But you can just look at what you think a mane would look like, the areas that should have hair, and do so. And you don't have to go all the way to the back of the bonnet because the hair will fall that way. And then for the bodysuit, the nice thing about the bodysuit is we can envision where we would want the tail to be. So when you're talking about the bottom, you can pick like a circle type area or even like a rectangle area and just keep placing hair along there. You don't have to do like the entire thing. You don't want to go all the way down to where the baby might actually sit. It's more envisioned this way. So it's done the same way where you take your crochet hook, you loop through where you want the yarn to be sitting, grab a couple of strands, fold them in half, pull it through, then through that loop, and tighten down. Does this take a little bit of time? Yes, this task can be somewhat tedious and time consuming, but it really is worth it to have that look. So I'm going to finish this and come on back and show you what it looks like when I've attached all of the mane and the tail. So I'm back with the hair placement. As you can see, I just did a short section, kind of like in a circle for the tail. You can do it to how you like it, how it looks really cute. And then I have the hair onto here. I'm going to lift it up so you can kind of see to get an idea of how far I went down with it. Not really that far because it covers it. You can do this in so many different ways. I wish I had hairstyling skills, but I really don't. I almost feel like I should just take this to a salon and be like, make this look good. But you could, if you want, braid the tail to be like a cute little braid, which obviously I can't do. Or with the hair on the front, if you wanted to kind of take your scissors and play hairstylist and kind of style the hair down the front, you could do so, or make some cute little braids. If you are awesome at hair, I mean, you could even get out some hair clips and put hair clips in here to make it extra cute. So I've given you the starting point, but that's on you. I'm not as great at it. This does work. I think it's super cute. This turned out absolutely adorable. This is so fun for a newborn photo shoot, as well as the sitter size or the 12-month size. So you can get like a walker in there if they just learned to walk. I know these are really popular for either newborn photography or those milestone sessions. Or this can also be for, you know, like a Halloween outfit in a warmer climate. I hope you really enjoy this tutorial. I enjoy doing it with you, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back for more fun tutorials soon.